Hello, we are back. When camera was off, we talked about this subject. I will recap this again, and it was just what was the stuff that it was holding me back. Let's say I was very self-conscious about my accent and like me lacking speaking perfect English. And then so like these are the stuff that we put limitation for ourselves. I put limit for myself for achieving what I want because I can't do this because I don't have this or I don't have that.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that you don't get those messages just out of nowhere, right? So society tells us, right, in general, that success looks a certain way, sounds a certain way, behaves a certain way. Yeah. And then we, right, regurgitate that. So then we tell ourselves, well,
They call me fresh out of both.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. I'm like, whatever. It is what it is.
Well, and the thing that I think is so particularly, we're recording this in the U.S., right? Yeah. We're so like U.S.-centric around what our expectations of what success looks like. But the reality is if you think of the global majority, it's not English-speaking people. So then do we think that there's not like a picture of success anywhere outside of here? Yeah. That there's not somebody who is being wildly successful in their native tongue or in their society, right? And so when we see people who reinforce those norms, you hear like representation matters.
Correct.
And so somewhere, right, there's a little person who will hear and see you and they have your same accent or their mom or dad has your accent. Yeah. And then you are rewriting their definition of success.
Yeah. Like I was just telling you, like it got to a point that I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna let my accent stopping me from what I want to do. And then when I reached 40, I was like, fuck this shit. I'm so sorry. I can't do this. There's no more time left.
Totally.
And if I don't do this now, then it will be never. So, like, I would rather to be a good role model or at least save one person compared to say, no, I'm going to live in this bubble and in this shell and I'm going to limit myself from other possibilities.
Absolutely. And that's the same kind of feeling that I think about when I... for a long time, I didn't maybe share as widely about the harder parts of my journey because, those are things that we're taught to be ashamed of. Correct. Or, taught that it's not appropriate to, but again, we're all going through, right, this experience of humanity together right now.
Yes.
And I think that one of the beautiful things about the internet and globalization and those types of things is it allows us to connect with people so far and wide and maybe people to not feel alone. But I also think that it's important, like what we're talking about, we have to kind of question those, like if I'm holding in my mind the idea that success looks a certain way, talks a certain way, acts a certain way, and I'm in a position of power, then I'm going to reinforce those norms and beliefs almost subconsciously. Mm-hmm. Right? In how I interview, and who I hire, and who I promote, and who I give raises to, and where I put my time and attention.
Yes.
And so... another kind of measure of success for me is like what am I doing to question my own beliefs and understandings that uphold norms that keep people in these places of fear or that reinforce the idea that the status quo is as it should be.
Absolutely. You use this word, I want to ask you this. Tell me, how do you handle fear? When something scares you, how do you go around it? Or how do you deal with it?
So I think fear, is...
opening my list of questions.
Yes, great. Fear, is an emotion like anything else. It's there often to protect us. And sometimes that's a really good thing. I think for people who have had harder, experiences or experienced trauma or those types of things, fear often is like the mechanism, right, that keeps us safe.
Okay.
Like we don't want to put ourselves into these situations again.
Yeah.
But sometimes we outgrow those stories. And so when I think of fear, I try to get curious with it, and I ask, myself, what is this fear trying to teach me? Wow. So I think of like we recently, you and I.
Oh!
Okay. We recently jumped out of an airplane.
Yes, we did.
Together on the same airplane, but with we did have Navy SEALs as our guides.
Yes.
But as part of that experience, I talked with one of the the guys that was part of the leadership training that we were in, and he asked me if I was going to jump. And I said, I am. I've decided to do it. I said, I'm really nervous, but I'm going to do it. And he said, I want to encourage you because you already decided to do the scary thing.
Yeah.
So when you get to the front of the airplane, like, don't close your eyes. Because you already know it's going to be scary.
Yeah.
And that kind of like blew my brain open because it made me realize that a lot of times we do things even though we are afraid. But we shrink ourselves in that process, so maybe we don't learn everything that's there for us to learn.
Wow.
And so how do we stay present in our fear? And I think it's important to say that there's different kinds of fear, right? There's fear that protects us from not being re-traumatized, right? In those places, I think we have to be really tender and gentle and take the time that we need to heal as much as we can and surround ourselves by people, right? To really honor that.
I love how you're analyzing this.
When you look at something like jumping out of an airplane, I mean, that's like an obviously big fear thing, right? And so that's a little more lighthearted, right?
Yeah.
But then I think about the fear of speaking truth to power. The fear of showing up in a situation where I need to maybe say the unpopular opinion.
Yeah, getting rejected.
Being rejected or offending, right? Or, putting myself on the line for standing up for what I truly know is right. And the fear in those moments, I ask myself the question, who benefits if I don't do this?
Jennifer, this is so powerful.
And that's, I think, what we have to ask ourselves, right? Yes. Like, if I stay quiet and I stay small, like, who am I benefiting? And some of it is my own, sometimes the benefit's myself because I can stay safe and quiet.
You're
and I don't
so
have
good.
to risk anything.
The stuff that you say, I'm going to make quotes for myself. I'm going to paint them on the wall. Like, really? Did you just come up with this just now? Or did you thought about it before?
Well, I've been recently trying to kind of challenge myself to be out of my comfort zone a little bit more.
Comfort zone.
You saw me give a TED Talk.
Yes.
A TEDx talk. And the topic was about staying safely silent, right? In the face of these large systemic injustices and inequities where, maybe it doesn't affect my day-to-day life and I could stay quiet.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say the wrong thing or be called out or any of that. But what I've learned is that that's how the powers that are now stay in power. When we're afraid of being called out, of saying the wrong thing, of upsetting somebody, of losing status, of what people are going to think of us, of rocking the boat. I grew up in a social message that constantly was like peacemaking, politeness, don't upset people, don't be too big in your opinions or your ideas. And I think to myself, like, who benefits? if I'm not fully showing up, even when I'm scared? And sometimes the answer is I benefit, but not in a good way, right?
Yeah.
I benefit by staying safe and small.
Wow. Thank you so much for like literally giving such a powerful like forget about this podcast right now. I'm like so in my head, I'm so somewhere else. Like I never heard this kind of analogy about fear and how to face with it, and how you said it, it was so incredibly beautiful.
Thank you.
And dissected in a very relatable manner. Thank you for saying all this.
You're welcome. I think fear is a lot like failure, that it isn't one giant thing. Okay, so we have to be willing to slow down enough to just say, like, what do I have to learn here?
Yeah.
And if it's something that needs to keep you safe, I don't think anyone should just blanketly push through fear all the time, right? Yeah. Sometimes we have to do what we have to do to take care of ourselves. Yeah. But more often than not, we are afraid of, something that is bigger than us, and it's pushing through. And so that's why I just try to, practice regularly, reminding myself, like, who benefits from the decision that I'm about to make right now.
Okay. Powerful.
Thanks.
Sometimes there is always one thing gets stuck in our head, like a kind of advice that it just shakes you, and it just always be on top of your head. You're like, something extraordinary. Tell me an advice that it was the best advice you ever received in your life.
I think that like teachers come to us all the time. And right now, something that I've really been sitting with is really, a lot of it is like what we've really just been talking about, is the idea of just really being present and grounded and connected to kind of my inner knowingness of myself, and that all of this other external stuff is it's a season, it's a moment. So this validation that I get over here because I've achieved this thing, or things are going very well, like just as easily could be matched over here by a personal hardship, or something not going well, or it could all change in an instant. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know that it's necessarily like specific advice that I've been given, but I think if I think about what I've been learning from kind of the different teachers in my life in this kind of current season, has been to remember that everything's fleeting. Things are going to come and go. And so if I put my effort into what's going to come and go, that my personal core, my well-being will also be up and down. Whereas if I align kind of my ideas of success or my wellness with, my own self, then I can trust that when I go through hard stuff, that's a season. But also when I'm doing really great too, that's also a season. And there's going to be times where we expand and contract, and that I'm learning to trust those rhythms of life. So that when I'm going through something that's hard, one of the TEDx speakers this weekend said, every storm runs out of rain, and he's not wrong, right? And so when I'm going through something that's hard, rather than putting my focus in this place where, the end all be all is whether or not this thing works itself out, right? Is that I trust that this is kind of part of the process, and then I get curious about, what do I have to learn here? Maybe that's like the advice, right? Is to be curious and to
That's a good one.
To think about, that there's always something to learn in what you're going through. Even if stuff is like, you are hot shit and everything's popping and awesome, and there's like not one thing you would change, right? There's still something to even learn in that space. Mm-hmm. I wish that I had this like beautiful piece of advice to share. I feel like
But being curious is very powerful.
It is.
Yeah, it consists of lots of things. Consists of being brave. Consists of think outside the box. Consists of like, just believe in yourself. Being curious, that means you have to go after things that it might be scary. It's very, it's dangerous.
Curiosity lacks judgment. And if I'm in a place of judgment, either of myself or others, I am not the nicest version of myself. I am not my highest self when I am living in a space of judgment.
Yeah.
And so I think that, when I am operating in kind of a belief system, like if you say something and it triggers me, and it's like, oh God, well, here goes Helen, and this is how she is, and all right. It's our partners, it's our parents, it's our siblings, it's our coworkers. We have these preconceived kind of thought patterns about how people are and why they're that way. Mm-hmm. If you're genuinely curious in a situation, then you can invite new understanding. Mm-hmm. Instead of just operating on an old story that's going to get you the same, the results of the old story every single time. Mm-hmm. Every single time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But if I'm curious, then that leaves room to be delighted. Yeah. It leaves room to learn something. Yes. It leaves room to have maybe my intuition confirmed that in fact this person is not that great, or whatever that is, right? Yeah. But I'm not just operating in this like autopilot. Got it. Where the same thing is coming out every single time.
Correct. Mm. Who influenced your life? Who was number one influencing your life?
We talked about my mom at the beginning of this, and I don't think I could answer the question without saying her. She is an enormous influence in so many different areas of my life.
If she was my mom, I would say her too.
So, I think that one of the beautiful things about her influence was her ability to create space for me to learn for myself. I also I grew up watching her do good in the world without anyone seeing it or knowing it.
And this is why exactly you're like that, and this is why your kids are like that. Right? You care about the world so much. I'm like, people don't care about the world as like no one does than you're 6 years old caring about the world.
And so that I think is really powerful. And so when I say that she influenced me, it's not just the fact that in fact, I think her success is probably the least influence, frankly. Yeah. Just watching how she has grown. When I had my eating disorder in high school, she took me to therapy, right? And was like, help me help my kid, right? Mm-hmm. And, she tells me this story, and so obviously I believe her, but, she asked the therapist, like, how do I help my daughter? And the therapist said, like, you need to deal with your own shit. Like, you need to do your own healing. And a lot of people would just be like, F you, help my kid, right? And so when I went through the hardest kind of formative time, it was like my mom went through her formative time at the same time. And sometimes we felt very far away from each other. Sometimes, like in hindsight, right, where I just like hated my mom because I was a teenager and that was the deal, or we were at odds. But she was showing me how to grow, how to move through these things. She wasn't just saying like, this is what's wrong with you and these are the steps you need to, right? She was the model for me to push through the hard stuff, to make the hard choices, to decide not to be in the relationship anymore, to, you know, shift that career goal, to say no to this, to open her mind and say, you know, I was wrong about how I used to think about this and now I'm going to show up in this way.
Yeah.
And so that I think is what has had the strongest influence.
Being very okay to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And just deal with all the facts.
Yes.
Okay.
And then just her like unparalleled just kind of kindness in the world without any expectation of return or acknowledgement for that was an enormous influence on me.
Beautiful. We need to have lunch with you or dinner with your mom very soon.
We're going to.
Yes. Who's your number one fan?
Whoever I'm present with in the exact moment.
Never heard that answer before. Like it. Beautiful.
I have learned that whoever I am present and connected with is going to be someone that sees themselves in me and then vice versa, and we can be mirrors to each other. I think that that is how I connect with people in a way, right? If I can be genuine and authentic and open, right? We had a fast friendship, right? Yeah. I feel like that that I have a positive impact on people if I'm present without agenda, without preconceived notions, but just truly present. I think that that creates, you know.
Okay. So now tell me, if you can choose any top woman in the world that you could have coffee with, who would you choose?
A living person?
Yes, a living person.
Good. Who would I choose?
Let me see. Can I be non-living? Sure. You know what? Living or non-living.
Oh, man. You know, I quoted, I know I can only pick one, but I quoted the activist Grace Lee Boggs in my TEDx talk this weekend.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know who Grace Lee Boggs is, she was at the forefront of the Black liberation and Black Panther movement in the 60s in Detroit. And she was an Asian American woman. And she could see that even though there were certain things, right, where she maybe had, oppression against herself, she could see that it was worse for her brothers and sisters who lived in dark-skinned bodies. And so she just gave her whole life to fighting alongside the people around her to make a better world for everybody. And I watched I think it's called...
So it will be her?
I would say it would be her.
Okay.
She's at the top of mind. I recently reread one of her books, and I look at her and you talk about kind of fear, and she would put herself in places so frequently where most people would assume she does not belong. And she would speak truth to power, and she would show up and be curious and be open-minded and be willing to be moved.
She was an activist?
She was.
No, it's interesting that you chose an activist. You know, it was very powerful. You know, because, does it matter for you if it's a feminist or is an activist?
I think, both of those terms have so much charge in our society today.
Yes. There is a reason I'm asking you this. So I want to see is, are you more toward activist or you're more toward feminist? And,
I think that they're interchangeable.
Yeah.
I'm more towards, I as I get older and I start to really think about kind of the legacy that I want to leave, right, in this life, and the purpose that I want to live into. would be to, right, when I think of the purpose that I want to kind of live into, and the reason that I really align myself with, you know, these activists that live today and that have come before us, you know, it's I want to elevate consciousness and depth of connection between people. And I believe that we can imagine a world in which everyone has the opportunity to thrive, that we hold everybody in a humanity where they're allowed to live with dignity, and that we don't have to be in this place where we're so against each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when I think of activists or feminists, to me, those are all people that are speaking truth to power. And, you know, it's all wrapped together, mm-hmm. right? Our liberation, our freedom, the change that we're creating in the world, it's either all of us or none of us, is how I look at it.
Yeah.
So feminism is like the deal over here, or if you're fighting, you know, for other different groups, that all of that together is in service of each other.
100%. Like, I feel like I started as a feminist, and then when I want to be love, when I want to spread love out there, I just realized my love cannot be racist.
Yeah.
And then I realized, you know what? I'm an activist. I love human being, and I love to do good, and I want to spread good and love. Yeah. So as much as I'm very, very pro-woman, but I would draw from the term feminist, because I feel like good person is good person. It has nothing to do with what is your gender and what is your color, or like I don't care where you're from. Like, you're a good person and I love you. And
feminism holds space for all those things too, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? It's the kind of media definition that makes it thing like, you know, someone hates men, or if a man can't be a feminist or anything like that.
Yeah. I agree. 100%.